Chapter 28. Sarah wasn't immediately aware of the imminent arrival of the Gargan. The dead weight of Waldo, for he was still utterly unconscious, made it impossible that they would be able to drag him very far. But as she looked up at the doctor's shout and saw him and the Brigadier, heedless of crossing the boundary of the Gargan's domain, running towards her, she also saw, away behind them, the fearsome figure of the creature itself, whipping its great snout high in the air to utter a bellow of triumph as it sighted its prey. "I can't hold him any longer," she gasped as the doctor arrived. "We'll take him," said the doctor. But as he seized Waldo's arm, the Gargan came forward at a run, its long neck outstretched, its great mouth agape. "Hold on!" cried the Brigadier, pulling out the gun. As the animal came nearer, it slowed down and stopped, its neck rearing up in the air and swaying like a snake charmer's cobra, as if it were puzzled by the embarrassment of riches laid out before it. There was nowhere to run to. Behind them was the cliff wall and the mouth of the cave. The Brigadier was aiming two-handed at the creature's head, his arms swaying as he tried to get it in the sights. "Wait!" said the doctor. "I've got a better idea." To Sarah's astonishment, he started to sing. "Clockley da path a men in clutch, arun aran arun. Clockley da mirth a tear a natch, arun arun arun." For a moment, it seemed as if it were going to work. The Gargan stopped swinging its head and looked straight at the doctor. But then, with a roar louder and more menacing than any they had yet heard, it drew its head back with evident intention of attack. The Brigadier pulled the trigger. Oh, what a fall was there! If the Brigadier hadn't skipped out of the way like a 10-year-old, he would inevitably have been crushed. The great head slammed down with a thud which shook the ground. The body, larger than 2 elephants, quivered momentarily, then sank down as the forelegs collapsed, rolled massively onto its side, and came to a shuddering halt. The forest, which had fallen silent at the last great bellow, came back to chattering, squawking life. "Now you've done it," said the doctor. Sarah sat down on a rock, her legs giving way under her. "Is it dead?" she said faintly. The Brigadier cautiously approached the huge body. "It doesn't seem to be," he said. "Not yet, at any rate." With Jeremy's help, the doctor laid Waldo onto the ground. "Captain Radley! Can you hear me? Captain Radley!" There was no reaction. He made a quick examination of the wound. "His scapula must be shattered," he murmured to himself. "But at least there's no bullet in there. With an exit wound like that—" He looked up and spoke aloud. "He's lost a great deal of blood," he said. Jeremy was fidgeting backwards and forwards, as if he were about to take off into the trees. "I say," he said, "don't you think we ought to get out of here? That thing might wake up, and suppose he's got a wife or something." "A good point," said the doctor. "We'd better make a stretcher." The Brigadier produced a knife, remarkably large and sharp for one carried in a trouser pocket, and he and the doctor quickly constructed a stretcher from a couple of saplings and the whippy branches of young trees, bound together with creeper. As Sarah brought back a bundle of leafy twigs, she caught the end of a slightly acrimonious exchange. "You were singing an old Venusian lullaby? Really, Doctor?" "A lullaby? Yes, that's just what it sounded like," she thought. "It's been remarkably efficacious in the past," said the doctor huffily. "Unfortunately, the Gargan didn't seem to have the same ear for music as my old friend Abidor." "That gun thing was certainly efficacious," said Jeremy, warily eyeing the recumbent monster. "I mean to say, wallop!" "Yes, handy little weapon," said the Brigadier, taking the twigs from Sarah and weaving them into the stretcher. "That's all very well," said the doctor, sitting back on his heels and letting the brigadier get on with it. "If he's dead, Lethbridge Stewart, Kaido's people will probably throw Onya and the rest of them out of Kimonya. If he's not, he'll track us down and have us for dinner." "Yes, well," said the brigadier, as he tucked in the last twigs, "if we'd stayed with Rockabye Baby, he'd be onto the port and walnuts by now." It was the brigadier, too, who had the bright idea. Having managed with a great deal of difficulty to get Waldo up the slope to the top, they'd had to tie him onto the stretcher at the steepest bit, they were on their way down the rather more gentle incline on the far side. Sarah and Jeremy were carrying the front end of the stretcher, with the doctor at the back. The brigadier was leading the way, following the line of the stream, when he suddenly stopped. Sarah nearly cannoned into him. "Eureka! That's usually my line," said the doctor. "What have you found?" "I was only thinking earlier today," he answered with a half grin on his face, "about my fox hunting days as a young man. Do you know, there was one run where the hounds lost the scent time and time again. And do you know why?" "Yes, I do. Indeed I do," said the doctor in high glee. "Well done, Lethbridge Stewart." What were they on about, thought Sarah. Why did they have to speak in riddles? "Why then?" said the brigadier. "Because the fox took to the water. Am I right?" "Quite right," said the brigadier shortly. He seemed to be miffed at having his moment of triumph pinched from under his nose. Thus it was that the next 100 yards or so were uncomfortably spent wading down, clambering down, or falling down, in Jeremy's case, the cascading waters of the little tributary. It was quite dark by now, and becoming really cold. Sarah found it very nearly impossible at times, even though the doctor and the brigadier had taken over the carrying of the stretcher. But the thought that the Gargan might be fooled by this stratagem, and Waldo's life saved, gave her a glow inside which made up for everything. Even though the welcome with which Onya received them seemed somewhat reserved, her first concern was for Waldo, but whether he would survive was another matter. To Sarah's horror, Onya and the doctor agreed that there was nothing they could do apart from cleaning him up and bandaging the wound. "They shot him with a simple old-fashioned firearm, you see. They always use them in the hunts. The audience prefers it. We can't replace the blood he's lost." Sarah wanted to stay and help, but she was shivering so much that Onya insisted that, like the others, she should go to her hut and dry off. This wasn't ordinary shivering, she thought to herself, as she desperately rubbed herself with the Kimonian equivalent of a towel. What was the matter with her? Yes, of course she was wet and cold. But this terrible shaking had come on when everybody seemed to be insisting that Waldo was going to die. She had never felt anything remotely like it before. She had had her quota of tears, of course. But this? It was as if she were weeping inside, grieving for the loss of something which had never been hers, and now never could be. And yet, "Oh, Waldo," she said in her mind, "if only it was me instead." Having wrapped herself in the soft knitted robe she found waiting on her bed, and tied the scarf around her neck, she hurried back. As she ran through the neat streets of the camp, she could hear the joyful chatter of the Kimonians preparing for the feast. And just across the bridge, she could see them starting to gather by the warm glow of the fires. As she neared the hut, she heard the voices of Onya and the doctor. Onya was clearly displeased. Sarah stopped. She didn't want to walk into the middle of a row. "What else could we have done?" the doctor was saying. Onya didn't answer. Then he said, "In any case, I think the point may be an academic one." Onya said, "I'm afraid you're right," and fell silent again. Sarah went in. Waldo was lying on the bed with a neat bandage on his upper chest. The doctor was covering the blanket which lay over him with a skin of close-grained fur which looked like sable, whilst Anya folded his blood-stained clothes. Apart from his almost imperceptible breathing, he lay quite still. His skin, waxen in the light of the flickering oil lamp, was drawn tight to the bones of his face. There hadn't been much point in her haste. Is he going to be all right?" she said. "What a stupid question! You only had to look at him." There was an appreciable pause before the doctor spoke. "We've made him as comfortable as we can," he said. "We just have to hope for the best." She sat down by the bed. She wanted to take his hand, but it was hidden under the blanket. The door opened. It was Kaido. He was wearing a full-length multicoloured robe, and his face was ceremoniously painted in a whirling pattern. Behind him, Sarah could see Jeremy lurking, and the Brigadier too. "The meat is roasted, Momonya," said Kaido. "The feast awaits our guests." Jeremy poked his head in the door. "Smells like Sunday dinner at school," he said. "Wouldn't surprise me if they'd got Yorkshire pud and all." "Oh, Jeremy." Kaido politely stood to one side. For a moment, nobody moved. Sarah became aware that everybody was looking at her. Oh, Doctor, I couldn't eat a thing. I'd rather stay here with Waldo." "I think you should come, Sarah. It's important that we should all be there. The feast is being held in our honour, you see." When she didn't move, he came over to her. "We shan't be far away," he said gently. They were all waiting for her. Reluctantly, she rose and went out. She stood by Jeremy and waited for the others. The Brigadier put a hand on her arm. "Stiff upper lip, old girl," he said. Except insofar as Kaido was their leader, and he seemed to be treated more like a big brother, there appeared to be very little awareness of class in the Kimonian society. There was no question of the best venison being reserved for the chief and his guests. People sat where they liked and wandered round the circle of fires, chatting to their friends and claiming a favourite titbit of meat from whichever spit was the nearest. The whole village was there, all dressed in their most colourful robes. Even the little children, running from group to group as though the whole village belonged to the same family, had their faces painted in intricate patterns. The sap wine was as freely available as the succulent meat, though nobody seemed to drink it immoderately, and before long the general tone of merriment and celebration had risen to a height which even drowned out the rival party going on in the camp club, which sounded to be a far less decorous affair. "Your food warms the belly as your welcome warms the heart, Kaido," said the doctor. "We thank you." "I hear your words as the words of a brother," replied Kaido. "Fill your hearts with our love and your bellies with our meat." Sarah looked at the wooden platter piled with choice pieces. What was the use of even trying? The first, and only, bit she had put in her mouth had been chewed 1,000 times and still wouldn't go down. She had had to surreptitiously remove it and hide it in a clump of grass. "My belly's almost full already. It's super. Sort of melts as you chew it," said Jeremy. He leant over and spoke quietly. "Do try a bit, Sarah. You must eat, you know." She gave him as much of a smile as she could manage. Poor old Jeremy. Everybody was always getting at him, but he wasn't so bad, really. Suddenly, she became aware of a distant noise which cut through the sounds of jollity, even through the piping of the wooden flutes and the rhythmic chants. A cold whiteness flooded her. Her skin tightened. It couldn't be, could it? "Listen!" she said sharply. The doctor heard her and spoke quietly to Kaido, who stood up and held both hands in the air, calling for silence. The chattering and laughter on the fringes went on, but enough villagers obeyed to make it possible to be certain even though the squealing roar was still a way off. "The Gargan! By Jiminy!" said the brigadier. "Even angrier and hungrier," said the doctor. "He's after Waldo Rudley," said Onya with a glance at the doctor. "He's after us all," the doctor said.